My brothers and sisters, there is a name I have avoided saying for years. A name that has lived in the quiet corners of my mind like an unopened letter, the kind you tuck away in a drawer because you know that opening it will rearrange the way you breathe. It's strange, isn't it? How a single name can carry so much weight. Not because of who they were to the world, but because of who they were to you and who you failed to be for them. I remember the first time that name lodged itself in my chest. I was younger, too confident, too certain that life was a set of doors meant to open automatically as long as I walked with enough purpose. In that version of myself, I believed regret was something that happened to other people, people who weren't paying attention, people without the clarity or courage I imagined I had. But regret is patient. It doesn't burst through the door, it waits behind it, listening, learning the pattern of your footsteps. And then one day, when you least expect it, it steps out and asks you a question you cannot answer honestly without breaking something inside yourself. I'm here today to tell you about the name that broke me. Not because I want sympathy, not because I want forgiveness, but because speaking about it is the only way I know how to make meaning out of the silence I've carried for too long. Before we go any further, I want you to understand something. This story is not about self-punishment. It is not about wallowing in guilt or presenting my pain as something noble. It is about truth. And truth, especially the kind we hide from, is the most painful form of honesty because it demands that we change. As I say this, I can feel that name pressing against the back of my teeth, asking to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be treated like the human being it belongs to. But the story cannot begin with the name. The story begins with the silence, with the years I spent trying to outrun a memory that was always faster than me. And so today, my brothers and sisters, I ask you to walk with me into that silence, because inside it lives something real, something difficult, something I owe to that name and to you. This is the beginning of a truth I can no longer look away from. The moment that shaped this regret didn't look like a moment at all. It looked ordinary, forgettable, and I think that's what makes regrets dangerous. They hide inside moments that don't warn you they matter. I made a decision. A small one, or so I thought. A decision rooted not in malice, but in convenience, in certainty, in a kind of tunnel vision we mistake for confidence. You see, I told myself I had no choice. Isn't that what we all say when we want to feel innocent? But choices always exist, even the ones we pretend we don't have. Back then, I prioritized myself. I told myself the world would bend around the path I walked, and if someone else fell along the way, well, I convinced myself that was the natural cost of ambition, that people would heal, that everything would sort itself out. It's so easy to believe in the myth of harmlessness when you're standing on the hill of your own advantage. But years later, when I saw the consequences I had tried so hard to ignore, I realized something painful. I wasn't the hero of my own journey. I wasn't even the victim. I was the one who hurt someone who trusted me. That decision, that one small, selfish decision, split their story in half. Before, after, we don't talk enough about the harm we cause unintentionally, about the wounds we create because we believed our actions would evaporate the moment we walked away. But harm doesn't evaporate. It settles in someone else's life. And that person, my brothers and sisters, that person had a name. I didn't see the way their shoulders folded in the days after. I didn't see the way their friends whispered, wondering why someone they trusted had walked away so abruptly. I didn't see any of it. I didn't allow myself to look, because deep down, some part of me already knew. What I had done wasn't just careless. It was cowardly. Years later, when the truth finally found me, I realized that regret is not the pain of what happened. Regret is the pain of the person you were when it happened. And from that moment on, my life and theirs were no longer separate stories. They were a single thread pulled too tightly, fraying on both ends. And so we move from the personal toward the world that enabled that harm. We grow up thinking our choices belong to us. But in reality, many of our choices are shaped, even distorted, by the systems that surround us. Systems designed to make us look up at power and down at people. My brothers and sisters, I want to tell you something that took me years to understand. I didn't hurt that person by accident. I hurt them because I lived inside a system that taught me to value myself above them. When you are rewarded for speed, you stop seeing those who move slowly. When you are rewarded for ambition, you stop seeing those who stand in your way. When you are rewarded for winning, you stop seeing who loses because of you. And this is not a personal failing, it is a learned one. The world tells us that success is a race, not a shared journey, a race. A race where you must outrun someone else just to prove your worth. A race where stepping on others becomes invisible because all you can see is the finish line. I grew up inside that race. I absorbed its logic, its pressure, its cruelty disguised as competition. And like so many of us, I didn't question it because questioning it meant slowing down, and slowing down meant losing. But systems don't just shape behavior, they shape morality. They convince you that the harm you cause is normal, expected, even deserved. And because of that, the people who fall through the cracks rarely get names. They become statistics, background characters, collateral. But that person I hurt, they weren't a statistic. They weren't collateral. They were someone with a life, a heart, a story. And yet, I let myself believe they were just an obstacle I had to bypass. That belief didn't come from cruelty within me. It came from cruelty around me. For years, I carried the comfort of that system like a shield that allowed me to look away, to tell myself it wasn't my responsibility, to pretend that harm evaporates simply because the system encourages it. But systems only survive when people cooperate with them. And in cooperating, I became part of the harm. It took me years to understand that acknowledging this wasn't self-hatred, it was self-awareness. It was the beginning of accountability. And accountability, as I would learn next, begins not with looking outward, but with finally listening to the person you hurt. There comes a moment, quiet, unplanned, when the truth stops knocking and starts breaking down the door. For me, that moment came the day I finally heard their side of the story. I wasn't prepared. I don't think anyone ever is. Their voice was steady, but underneath it lived years of unspoken questions. Questions I had never given them the chance to ask. They told me what it felt like, the confusion, the embarrassment, the hollow ache of being dismissed by someone they trusted. They told me about the nights they replayed our last conversation, wondering what they did wrong. They told me about the silence I left them in, a silence they mistook for their own inadequacy. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not guilt, not shame, but recognition. Recognition that their pain was not abstract. It was real. It belonged to them, and I had placed it there. As they spoke, I realized something devastating. Regret is never about the moment you did something wrong. It's about the moment you understand the impact and wish, with every part of yourself, that you could go back in time and make a different choice. I listened as they described the ripple effects, the opportunities they lost, the confidence that cracked, the relationships that became harder to trust. I had never imagined my absence could echo so loudly in someone else's life. And then they said something that will stay with me forever. I just wish you had looked at me and seen a person. My brothers and sisters. That sentence broke something inside me. Because they were right. I hadn't seen them, not fully. I saw only the parts of them that fit into my life, my goals, my convenience, and the rest I ignored. But hearing their pain was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of my moral awakening. Their voice forced me to confront a truth I had long avoided. The real cost of my actions was not measured in my regret, but in their suffering. Avoidance is an easy habit. It starts with a small lie you tell yourself, I'll deal with it later, and before you know it, later becomes years. For a long time, I thought silence protected me, that if I didn't speak about what I had done, it would lose its power. But silence does not dissolve regret. It feeds it. Over the years, that silence hardened into distance. Distance from the people I cared about. Distance from opportunities I didn't believe I deserved. Distance from the person I wanted to become. I began to mistrust myself, to second-guess my decisions, my instincts, even my kindness. I kept people at arm's length because I was afraid that getting close would reveal the cracks I carried. I told myself I was busy. I told myself I preferred solitude. I told myself connection would come later. But those were excuses. The truth was far simpler. I couldn't connect with others because I hadn't made peace with the version of myself who caused harm. Avoidance turned my life into a collection of unfinished sentences, of moments I walked away from too quickly, of apologies I rehearsed in my mind but never delivered. And most painfully, avoidance cost me the chance to grow. Because you cannot grow into a person you are afraid to face. It took me years to understand that regret doesn't imprison you, silence does. Regret wants to teach you, silence wants to hide you. And eventually, I learned that naming the regret, speaking it aloud was the only way to free myself from it. There is a moment, a precise, astonishing moment when you decide to stop running. For me, it happened on an ordinary evening. No dramatic lighting, no storm, no sudden revelation, Just the quiet hum of life continuing around me while I stayed frozen in time. I sat alone, the weight of years pressing down on me. And for the first time, instead of pushing the memory away, I let it sit beside me. And I said their name, out loud. It was not a confession. It was not an apology. It was an acknowledgement, one I had owed them for far too long. Saying their name felt like cracking open a sealed box. Inside were years of unexpressed truths, dusty memories, and the realization that, by avoiding their name, I had avoided my humanity. As the sound of their name echoed in the room, something shifted in me, something subtle but unmistakably real. It was as if I had opened a window in a room that had been closed for so long the air had grown stale. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel everything. The guilt, the grief, the remorse, but also the love, the gratitude, the recognition of their place in my life. Naming them was not the end of the story. It was the turning point, the moment where regret transformed from a shadow into a teacher. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Avoidance keeps you trapped in the past, but naming the truth invites you back into the present. And with that invitation came a new question. What would accountability look like from here? My brothers and sisters, accountability is often misunderstood. Many believe it is about punishing yourself, drowning in guilt, or carrying sorrow as a lifelong burden. But that is not accountability, that is stagnation. Accountability is something different, something quieter, something harder. It is the willingness to understand the real impact of your actions without excuses, without defensiveness, without turning your guilt into a spectacle. It is the commitment to repair what can be repaired, to change what can be changed, to grow in the direction of the person you should have been all along. I realized that punishing myself served no one, not the person I hurt, not the people in my life, not my community, not the future I hope to build. Self-punishment is still a form of self-focus. Accountability, on the other hand, is relational. It asks, what does healing look like for the person I harmed? How do I ensure I never cause this harm again? What can I build from this pain that gives back, not takes away? Accountability allowed me to step out of the shadows of my regret and into the light of responsibility. It did not erase the past, but it gave the past purpose. And from that purpose came the beginnings of action. I can't rewrite history, but I can choose the story I write next. And so today, after years of hiding from myself, I am choosing action over avoidance. I reached out, not expecting forgiveness, not demanding closure, just offering truth, clarity, and a willingness to repair what I could. Beyond that single relationship, I committed myself to living differently, showing up with intention, choosing empathy when convenience feels easier, refusing to participate in systems that reward harm, making space for the people around me, not as obstacles, but as human beings, with stories as fragile and powerful as my own. What I owe them is not a performance of remorse. What I owe them is a changed life. And every day, I try imperfectly, but sincerely, to live in a way that honors that. Because regret without transformation is just nostalgia for a different version of yourself. My brothers and sisters, if you have a regret, and if that regret has a name, hear me when I say this, you are not alone. We all carry moments we wish we could rewrite. We all have names that sit heavy on the tongue. We all have choices that haunt us in the quiet hours of the night. But regret is not a life sentence. It is a doorway. And walking through it requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to see yourself not as the villain of your story, but as a human being capable of change. If there is a name you've avoided, a truth you have buried, maybe today is the day you sit with it. Not to punish yourself, but to reclaim your humanity. Because when we name our regrets, we don't break, we begin. And so I leave you with this. The past cannot be changed, but the person who lived it can be. My brothers and sisters, before you go, I want to leave you with something deeper than a lesson, softer than a warning, and more enduring than regret itself. I want to leave you with a truth I discovered only after walking through years of silence, denial, reflection, and finally liberation. Because when you step out of the long shadow of your mistake, you begin to realize something extraordinary. Regret is not the enemy. It is the compass. It is the quiet inner signal reminding you of who you were meant to be before fear misled you, before pride confused you, and before the world convinced you that rushing forward mattered more than looking around. And once you understand that, regret becomes something else entirely. It becomes a guide, We spend so much of our lives pretending we are unbreakable, constructing identities made of confidence and ambition, tightly guarding the parts of ourselves that ache. But the truth is, we are meant to break open a little. That is how light enters. That is how compassion enters. And that is how another human being's story finds space inside our own. The moment you allow yourself to feel the sharp edge of your regret, something soft begins to grow beneath it. Something humble, something honest. Something that reorients your life toward justice, toward empathy, toward connection, not because you are perfect, but because you have finally faced the parts of yourself that aren't. If you are listening to this and you are holding a name inside your chest, a name you've buried, a name you've avoided, a name that feels too heavy to say aloud, I want you to know this. Speaking it will not ruin you. It will free you. The ground will not collapse. The sky will not fall. What will collapse is the wall you've built around your own heart. And what will fall is the illusion that avoiding pain will protect you. It won't. It only delays your healing. And when you finally whisper that name, even if no one else hears it, you will feel something shift. You will feel your breath return to its natural rhythm. You will feel your humanity waking up again. Regret is not a prison. It is a doorway. And the courage it takes to walk through that doorway is already inside you. So tonight, or tomorrow, or whenever you find the quiet moment that life always eventually offers, sit with your regret. Don't fight it. Don't fear it. Let it rise. Let it speak. Let it teach you. Because on the other side of that lesson is a version of you who is braver, kinder, slower to harm, quicker to listen, and infinitely more capable of love. My brothers and sisters, if my regret still has a name, then yours does too. But that name does not define you. It calls you toward change, toward accountability, toward healing. And when you answer that call, you will realize something I learned far too late. We cannot rewrite our past, but we can write a future worthy of it. My brothers and sisters, before we close, let me leave you with this one truth I learned far too late. Regret is not a chain meant to hold you down. It is a quiet invitation to rise. We spend so much of our lives trying to outrun the moments that broke us, convinced that moving faster will make the past disappear. But the past does not vanish. It waits. And when we finally turn around and face it, we realize that the weight we feared was never designed to crush us. It was designed to shape us. If there is a name you've been carrying in silence, a memory you've been avoiding, a truth you haven't had the courage to speak, know this. Naming it will not destroy you. It will rebuild you. It will remind you that growth is not born from perfection, but from honesty, from the bravery to admit where we faltered, and the determination to walk forward with more compassion than we had before. Every regret holds a lesson. Every lesson holds a path. Every path leads, eventually, toward healing. So tonight, if your heart is heavy with a name you've tucked away, let it rise. Whisper it, honor it, learn from it. Because we cannot change the story already written, but we can change the storyteller we choose to become. And sometimes, that is enough to begin again.